Let's start the debate.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the Spectrum Bay News 9 and the Tampa Bay Times for St.
I do have it a little bit faster just because I'll leave it at 1.25. I watched this when it first aired about a month ago. Um, yeah.
Petersburg Mayoral Debate of 2021. I'm Spectrum Bay News 9 evening anchor Holly Gregory.
And I'm Steve Contorno, Tampa Bay Times political editor. We will be your moderators for this debate. Before we meet the candidates, let's go over the ground rules.
Here are those rules. This is an hour-long debate. Each candidate will be given equal time for their responses, and since this is a virtual debate with a lot of candidates, we'll be giving each of the candidates cues to signal when their time is up. And just to let you know, our Spectrum Bay News 9 team is stationed with each of the candidates, and they'll be holding up a green, yellow.
So here you can see all the candidates. We got Marcel Powers, Tori Nelson, Pete Boland, Robert Blackmon, as you can see by his signs, Michael Ingram, Ken Welch, Wengay Newton, and Darden Rice. Just want to make sure this is working properly. I know Twitch is weird sometimes. All right.
Yellow or red card to signal when the time is up. And when a candidate's time is up, just know that their mics will be muted.
Now on to opening statements. Each candidate will have 30 seconds to introduce themselves. We will go in alphabetical order, and there will be no closing remarks. We will instead end on lightning round questions.
All right, so let's dive right into those opening remarks. We will start things off with Robert Blackmon. Mr. Blackmon, you have 30 seconds for your opening. Go ahead, please.
Hi, I'm Robert Blackmon. I'm a current St. Pete City Council member, and I'm running to be your next mayor. I'm about as St. Pete as it gets. I was born in the heart of downtown at Bayfront Hospital and graduated from St. Pete High. I'm a small business owner with a portfolio of apartments that I rent out below average market rent. In 2019, I was honored.
Something I read just a couple days ago, or fairly recently. I guess he owns some low-income apartments, I believe on the south side, and he was in the process of evicting them all before there was a lot of attention put on it, and then he um, canceled those evictions. So, just some interesting information there.
Honored to be elected to City Council as the youngest member in our city's history. I have an outsider business mindset coupled with success inside the walls of City Hall to make me the best choice to be your next mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blackmon. Mr. Boland, on to you. 30 seconds.
Hi, my name is Pete Boland, and I am not a politician. I'm running for mayor because I don't like politics. And as a business owner,
So, I hear it a lot lately that people they run for political office because they're an outsider and they're not a part of the system, which I understand the appeal sometimes for that, but um, so you're running for an executive position, and St. Petersburg has a strong executive mayoral position, it's, and I think there's a quarter of a million people in St. Pete, so you're running for a position that you don't know a lot about, and you don't like politics. Like, why should people elect you? Like, even if you have good ideas, you don't necessarily know the processes. I'm not saying that like I understand the appeal of not wanting a career politician. Like I totally get that. But I think some experience, and technically he is a business owner, but owning a business, I don't know if that really translates to uh, running a city. Um, but yeah, I don't know, it's just something that I always kind of I don't necessarily get annoyed by it. It's just I find it strange that some people like to tout uh, being an outsider when really it's kind of a hindrance. I mean, it took Donald Trump a solid bit of time to actually like get a system that he could could stick with. I guess when he was president, like he had no experience in politics, and that it's gonna hurt you if you don't know what you're doing. But yeah,
I've dealt with all the challenges the government can bring to us. I've even taken on the Kreisman administration in court and defeated them. I've got the executive experience, the moderate mindset, and the common sense approach to solving problems and to get things done for St. Petersburg. I love this city very much and want to push St. Pete first. Join us at peteforstpete.com and learn more about our campaign. We have tons of excited supporters, and we can't wait to have you on our team.
Thank you for that, Mr. Boland. And now on to Michael Ingram. You have 30 seconds for your opening, sir. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Michael Ingram, and I'm running to be your next mayor because I want to see someone young leading our city into the future. I was born and raised here, and I plan to spend the rest of my life here. So it's important to me to see someone running our city who's going to be here to see the effects of running that city well into the future.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ingram. Mr. Nelson, you have 30 seconds. Your opening statement. Mr. Nelson, can you unmute yourself, please?
I'm sorry. I'm Tori Nelson, and I'm young, energetic, unbiased, and most of all, I got a good heart. And I'm running for mayor of St. Pete. I want a lot of innovative programs to the city. With my Healthy Tree, Healthy Me program, I want to restore the city's natural resources and possibly plant fruit tree on every parcel in the city. And also, I'm adamant about gun violence, and I would like to nip in the bud with early intervention programs from pre-K all the way up to high school. So we have intellectual community.
Mr. Nelson, thank you for that. On to Wingate Newton now. 30 seconds for your opening statement. Mr. Newton, go ahead.
I'm Representative Wingate Newton, born and raised in Midtown South St. Petersburg, the most impoverished area in all of Pinellas County, and it's been that way for the last 20 years. I served 8 years on the St. Pete City Council. I served under 3 mayors. I served 4 years in the state legislature, where I built relationships and bridges to bring home much needed resources. I want to be your next mayor. I can, from day one, being.
So I would say one advantage for Wingate Newton having that, I guess, more like I think he has in some ways more conservative leaning, maybe not necessarily conservative leaning opinions, but he's got some he's got a lot of conservative I don't know, I guess bridges, and I think technically I guess that could be good for the city. I know like with the current red tide situation, relations between Rick Kreisman and Ron DeSantis haven't been great, to say the least. A lot of political um, BS going on there. Um, yeah, cooperation definitely can go a long way, but at the same time, yeah, it's hard. It's hard to pick a middle road these days. So I don't know if it's really a viable political option for any politician, especially in St. Pete. Maybe 10 years ago, but
Being a lifetime member of the legislature, step onto the House floor, work with my colleagues, bring home much needed resources. But Wingate Newton from here.
Thank you, Mr. Newton. Ms. Powers, you have 30 seconds for your opening statement.
Hi, my name is Marcelle Powers. I'm a sixth generation Floridian. I'm a mother of 2 small children that were born here in St. Petersburg, and I'm also a small business owner. I own Kenwood Organic Produce. We deliver produce boxes all over the city, and we double EBT benefits, helping the food desert right now. And I have lots of plans to help the food desert and also build a monorail that can go across the entire state.
Thank you, Ms. Powers, for that. And now we'll move on to Darden Rice for your opening statement. Go ahead, Ms. Rice.
I'm Darden Rice. St. Pete is growing, and we need a mayor who has the vision to see what's possible and the experience to make it a reality. From a world class education system for all of our children, to good paying jobs, to a culturally rich city that is warm and welcoming. Everybody deserves a shot at these opportunities. And that's why I'm running to continue this incredible progress that our city is on that works for everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Rice. And finally, Mr. Welch, your 30-second opening statement.
I'm Ken Welch, and I'm a third generation St. Pete resident. Our city is changing and growing, but growth alone is not progress. I'm running to build inclusive progress for everyone, progress that's authentic to what makes St. Pete special, respects our culture, values, and character, protects our environment, and doesn't outpace our infrastructure. I want to build that future in partnership with you. Let's talk about progress.
Mr. Welch, thank you for that. And thank you to all of our candidates. Welcome to this debate. Let's get things started now with our first question. And this is about the future of the Tampa Bay Rays. And each one of you will have 1 minute to answer this first question. And here it is. Can St. Petersburg sustain a Major League Baseball team? And how would you work as mayor with the Rays? And Mr. Bullen, you will start us off on that question. And you have 1 minute, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for asking me the question. It's something that's near and dear.
I think it's really worth noting that I think it's the contract with the Rays staying in St. Pete. It doesn't end until 2027, so some of these conversations might be a little premature. But for some reason, the Tropicana Field Stadium, it's been I don't know, it's been a big issue in St. Pete for quite some time now. I mean, I guess you could say going back to when it was originally built. Uh, that's a whole other story.
Dear to my heart as a former season ticket holder for the Rays, current season ticket holder for the Rowdies, current season ticket holder for the Buccaneers, and a passionate Tampa Bay Lightning fan. This issue is very important to me. It's a quality of life issue. It's a pride issue. The Tampa Bay Rays are iconic with St. Petersburg, and they were the original catalyst for the downtown renaissance. I think it's crucially important to do what we can to save pro sports here in Pinellas County. We went through a lot of pain and suffering between the destruction of the gas plant district through eminent domain, removing that.
Yeah, that was basically what I was talking about. Where the field was originally built.
neighborhood 30 plus years ago to sitting with a dormant stadium without a team. And I'm someone who grew up in St. Pete, remembers the Blockbuster video boycott back then. My approach is going to be putting St. Pete first, protecting the taxpayers. I think we can build a first of the next generation of stadium. I think that we need to take a look at the Montreal plan as it stands and just really call their bluff. I think St. Pete can definitely sustain a baseball team. It just needs to be the first of the next generation of baseball stadiums.
I don't know what that means necessarily, the first of the next generation of baseball teams, but I would say, if the attendance is low, and I guess the real question is, does it pay for itself? Which I'm not entirely sure if it does. I would assume maybe it does. I don't know. That's worth more research.
All right, thank you for that, Mr. Bullen. We'll move on now to Michael Ingram. The question is to you. You have 1 minute. Can St. Petersburg sustain a Major League Baseball team? And how would you, as mayor, work with the Rays? Go ahead, Mr. Ingram.
St. Pete is definitely capable of sustaining a Major League Baseball team, as we've seen. We've hosted them for years. But before we start negotiating with the Rays for the future of where they're going to be, we have to first off wait out the lawsuit that's currently pending against the owner of the Tampa Bay Rays, as we don't know specifically who will be the person that we should be negotiating with. Secondly, a split team between Montreal and here isn't beneficial for our city due to the amount of cost we would invest in building them a stadium to only be used half the time. If the Rays want to stay in St. Pete, they have to stay in St. Pete. And lastly, St. Pete needs to balance what it's spending for the Rays with the benefit it's getting back. The team has to invest back in the city for the city to invest in them.
Thank you for
I think it's a really good point as well.
that, Mr. Ingram. Moving right on down the line to Mr. Nelson. You have 1 minute to respond. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, yes, I'm sorry. As an ex-professional athlete, I think I can relate to them a little better than other candidates. I have to look more into the logistics of maintaining the Rays. But from the outside looking in, it doesn't seem like the owner of the Rays have even received this back. So maybe we need to give the Rays a little help, because recreation is very important. And I think the Rays should be a recreational fixture in our community. Everyone loves to go to the game. There's a lot of states and cities that would. And if we're going to be moving ascending upward, I think that's something we really have to consider. And in my whole life and history, I've never heard of a city that sues their own team. So I would like to smooth that relationship out and see what we can do.
Thank you for that, Mr. Nelson. On to Mr.
I think Tori Nelson has a good heart, but I don't know. The cracked up audio. I don't know.
Newton. Go ahead, sir. You have 1 minute to respond.
I guess I just mean it's kind of like this is your. I think this video got like 3,000 views isn't necessarily a whole lot, but you're gonna have clips going all throughout Twitter or Facebook or wherever. Like you want to have like the best version of you on this debate stage so that you can clip it for ads or whatever. And I don't know. It's unfortunate. I feel like he's got some good ideas. Although, at the same time, as he admits, he isn't entirely up to date on some of the information. But yeah.
Thank you. Absolutely, we should keep the Rays here. I support the Rays. I supported my whole 8 years on council. I served under 3 mayors, and I know exactly how to fix this problem. A strong mayor format of government, the mayor doesn't vote. Baker didn't vote, Foster didn't vote, and Chrysler didn't vote. They were going to meet with the Rays, come out with whatever they gave them, and try to go back to council and force them into taking that deal. I want to bring council to the table because they're the only ones that do the voting. I don't need them all 8 of them. I just need 5 to make sure we got what's best for the taxpayers, what's good for the Rays, and what's good for our community. I can support a new stadium, move it to close to the MLK. They in 2007 said they would put all their baseball operations on 15 acres. And then if they want to do a split season, I'll support that as long as it's St. Pete Montreal Rays. If the St. Pete taxpayers have to pay for this, our name needs to be on that new stadium. I think that's the best way to do it. I think that's the only way to get it done.
So I thought that was interesting. He wants St. Pete's name on the stadium, but it is technically an advertising opportunity. If I believe correctly, like Tropicana Field, like Tropicana, I would assume pays to have their name on there. That would help with the costs theoretically, but I guess it depends on how exactly they redevelop the area.
Thank you, Mr. Newton. And now over to Marcial Powers. You have 1 minute. I'll repeat the question. Can St. Petersburg sustain a Major League Baseball team? And how would you, as mayor, work with the Rays? Ms. Powers, 1 minute to you now.
Well, it's obvious that St. Petersburg is growing largely in size, which only means more and more potential baseball fans for them. When they're presented with the fact that we are a growing city, offering them more and more potential fans, we know them as our World Series team, they're going to want to stay here. And there's a lot of walkability issues we have with the stadium currently. It's a concrete jungle, and it would be nice to have a more beautiful landscape outside of the Tropicana that leads visitors to local businesses so we can help our economy. So I believe adding more green space outside of the stadium is going to be huge for keeping them here and beautifying the stadium in general. I think we have, if not the ugliest, one of the ugliest stadiums right now, so we really need to work on improving our aesthetics.
So there's a book I read. It's a really short book called "Where Have All the Mango Trees Gone," and uh, it dealt with the history of the Tropicana Field site and the gas plant district, Peppertown, Methodist Town, you know the interstates, and a lot of the bad things that were done. And one of the things that they talked about, that the author talked about at the very end, was new plans to redevelop the area. And they forget exactly how they described it, but it was sort of wanted to redevelop part of the Tropicana Field site as a town center that would lead out to various parts of the city's business areas, including, not just downtown, but also businesses on the south side. And I thought it was an interesting idea. But I definitely also, any redevelopment would make it look better because it's a 30-year-old stadium and a giant parking lot. So
Thank you for that, Ms. Powers. And on to Ms. Rice now. 1 minute to you. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Well, I am a Rays fan and a Rowdies fan. And if the Tampa Bay market didn't already have Major League Baseball, we would be at the top of the list as a desirable place for baseball to come. So I want to work with the Rays. I do want them to stay. I want to do what it takes to see how that works. But as mayor, I will put our city first. And I don't want to give away the store, but I do want to listen to the Rays. I'm certainly going to work collaboratively with them. I want to hear what they want in terms of the two city idea and to be able to have them make their presentation and their pitch, if you will, to the public, and to see if this is something that the public wants to do. I think there's something that could ultimately be worked out that our residents may find favorable, but we only know that if we approach this with civility and respect and collaboration, and I intend to do that.
Thank you for that, Ms. Rice. And now on to Mr. Welch. You have 1 minute to respond, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you. I certainly believe the Rays can be successful in St. Petersburg. I believe this is about relationships. It's about return on investment to the taxpayers, but it's also about the reality of Tropicana Field, and that this is a once in a generation opportunity. We ought to be intentional about making sure that redevelopment reflects our values. The Rays are a part of that, but they're not the entirety of that situation. This is personal to me. My grandfather's business was at the gas plant. It was dislocated for the interstate. Our church was at the gas plant, along with many other churches, businesses, and 800 people. They were dislocated. We have to keep that in mind as we move forward. We have the opportunity to redevelop the Trop in a way that honors its history and fulfills all those promises. The Rays can be a part of that, but we need honest communication to move forward. As a county commissioner, I've had a long-term relationship with the Rays. We'll continue that moving forward.
Thank you for that, Mr. Welch. And now finally on this question, it's to Mr. Blackmon. Let me repeat it a final time here. Can St. Petersburg sustain a Major League Baseball team, and how would you as mayor work with the Rays? 1 minute to you, Mr. Blackmon.
Thank you. Well, first of all, the answer is yes. St. Pete can sustain a Major League Baseball team. We're a Major League city, and we deserve a Major League team. That being said, how would I work with the Rays leadership? I'd work with them the same way I worked with them as a council member. I have a great relationship with the executive leadership of the Rays, and I talk to them all.
I don't know if I mentioned it before. Robert Blackmon, he's been on the city council since 2019. Just wanted to throw that out there. Don't know exactly what district, but maybe it's on here. It's not on here. Oh yeah, and also Tory Nelson. He's not affiliated with the Democratic Party, but he is an independent. Yeah.
Multiple times each week. And the reason is I respect them because they've respected us. They've been good corporate partners, and they've supported a lot of charities.
Part of why I make note of that is he also kind of bills himself as an outsider, but yeah, I don't know.
Our city. But I'd like to see that stadium site reimagined with a consolidation between the Rowdies and the Rays on one stadium, so we could also have Al Lang be redeveloped, hopefully as parkland or possibly even a museum. It would benefit our entire community. But absolutely.
I think that's an interesting idea too, is combining the stadium for the Rowdies and the Rays, possibly. I personally, I'm not a big sports person, so I'm mostly indifferent to these topics. But
I continue working with the Rays in the same way I've worked with them on council.
Okay, thank you all for your responses. You will each have 30 seconds to respond to this follow-up question, also about the Rays. Would you approve of using taxpayer dollars or public land, like the Trop site, to build a ballpark for the Rays if they split their season with another city like Montreal? Mr. Ingram, we will start with you.
If the Rays split their season between us and another city, they're putting half of the effort in that they should be putting into investing back into our city. If we're to invest taxpayer dollars, we should be getting everything that the Rays are willing to give us and then some. As a mayor, your first responsibility is to the people, the taxpayers, not to a Major League Baseball team, which is trying to get one foot out the door.
Thank you. And on to Mr. Nelson. Mr. Nelson, you have 30 seconds.
Yes, sir. That's my question. It wouldn't be fair for me to answer that question today. I would really have to dive into the numbers and look at the long-term effects and how it would trickle down affect our whole city. Because I know our taxpayers, I have to see what it would affect in the long term and what it would trigger. So it's something I actually have to dive into and it's just calculate numbers.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Nelson. Mr. Newton, let me repeat the question for you. Would you approve of using taxpayer dollars or public land to build a ballpark for the Rays if they split their season with another city?
Absolutely, but only if the taxpayer's name is on the stadium. The original stadium was the Florida Central Stone in Tropicana Field. But I want the taxpayers to be able to have their name on it. I can support a St. Pete Montreal team. And when they're gone away, I want to make sure the city has full use of that facility to do events and generate revenue that would benefit the
That would definitely be really important. Is not having a stadium sit empty for the majority of the year. I mean, that's basically what happened to the Tropicana Fields throughout the late 80s, early 90s. The stadium's been there for quite some time. And actually, let me look it up. So Tropicana Field finished construction in 1990, it looks like. And so opened in 1990, and the Rays didn't actually start playing there until 1998. So for 8 years, it didn't necessarily sit empty. There were other teams playing there, the Lightning, Tampa Bay Storm, but it was built as a baseball field. So they broke ground in 1986, so that it took them almost 10 years to find an actual team. More than 10 years. I don't know. It seems stupid.
taxpayers who pay for it.
Thank you, Mr. Newton. Ms. Powers, same question to you, 30 seconds.
It seems stupid to build something that you don't actually have like long-term plans for. I know they originally demolished the gas plant district with the supposed intentions of building I think it was a industrial park or something like that, and somehow it turned into a baseball field, just an empty baseball field. I think they were in talks to try to get baseball teams prior to the Rays, but it seems like you'd want to have that planned out before you actually break ground. I mean, I'm not entirely sure how the process works, but
I would open it up to a citywide vote because it's not my money, it's the taxpayers' money. So they're the ones who need to decide how they want to use their money. I would be interested in looking in other uses of a stadium, though, if we're going to spend money on it, like Blackmon just said, moving rowdies there as well. I've heard WWE likes to use the stadium. So if there's other sports teams, I might advocate for that, but it's the taxpayers' decision ultimately.
Thank you, Ms. Powers. Ms. Rice, let me repeat the question for you. Would you approve of using taxpayer dollars or public land to build a ballpark for the Rays if they split their season with another city?
You know, it's all balanced and it really depends on the return on investment. A smaller stadium might mean cost reductions. There may be benefits to partnering with Montreal that the Rays will have some ideas on what exactly that means and what that looks like. But with serious issues like affordable housing, keeping up with our infrastructure, there are serious issues that we need to keep up with that I think are a higher priority than a stadium. But I welcome to working with the Rays to see what makes sense on paper.
Thank you, Ms. Rice. And Mr. Welch, your response?
Thank you. I believe the Rays are going to have to bring reasonable partnership to the table to make this work. As a county commissioner, I led the effort along with my commission colleagues to set aside 1 cent of additional bed tax as the county's contribution. I'm blessed to have 5 commissioners who have endorsed me. And so that relationship will come in handy when we're trying to get the county to commit those funds. But the Rays have to bring substantial investment to the table as well. We have more than $2.4 billion in infrastructure just for our water system. That has to be the priority.
Thank you, Mr. Welch. Mr. Blackmon, your response.
Yes, I would support bed tax dollars as well. I have a good working relationship with the county commission too, and I'm proud to be endorsed by Commissioner Kathleen Peters. We need to look at land in lieu of payment. That's what I had said before when we were asked about this, because we right now have a stadium on 86 acres. If we could build a new stadium on 30 acres with a 13-acre stadium and maybe 17 or 18 acres in lieu of payment, that would be the way to go. But no general fund dollars and no giving away everything just to get a team like the debacle in Miami.
And finally, Mr. Bolin.
Yes, well, we already have the land. We have the Allang site. We have the Tropicana Field site. That's definitely our big bargaining chip. I think I'm starting to come around to the idea of Montreal, but we'd have to have some real concessions from the Rays. I'd want to make sure that we had spring training there. All those spring training games should be in St. Pete. As we were the birthplace of spring training baseball. There needs to be no new taxes. And we have the land to do the bargaining chip. I asked my fellow career politicians up here on this day, where have they been the last 14 years? This is an issue that's tired in St. Pete. It has to get done. Let's have a small business approach and work with the Rays to get things done now, this time.
All right, Mr. Bolin, thank you for that.
Yeah, career politicians. So it's funny. like I understand his frustrations, but if let's say he were to win, I can't see. I think he would come to the realization that he also has to work with the city council or the county commission, while also having to negotiate with whoever's in charge of the race. I know there is that lawsuit against Stu Steinberger, but you also have the, I forget what it is, board of directors or whoever it is, that that is also the co-owners, I guess. But it's not an issue where you can just unilaterally say, "Hey, this is what's happening. This is the way it's going to be done." Like you have to work with other people.
And we're going to move on now to our third and final question on this topic of the raise in Tropicana Field. And again, you will have 30 seconds.
I think that's in a way that's where experience would help. If you have any kind of existing relationship with Ray's leadership, then that would help you in this situation. And obviously, like the you know the city council people, when Gay Newton and Ken Welch, they would have that. But
For each of these responses. And the question is, would you be compelled to stick with the 2 finalists for Trop redevelopment selected by Mayor Kreisman, or could this entire process start over from scratch? Again, it's
I think this process has actually been I don't remember exactly how much it costs, but it has cost some money to. I think they got like 9 different proposals or something like that, and they narrowed it down to 2. So restarting all this from scratch would cost more money. Um, I think the candidates would have to explain why it's worthwhile to completely start the process over again. It's almost, it kind of reminds me of the St. Pete Pier debacle. It took years to get that figured out. All these different plans, and they scrapped the plans and started fresh again. Um, it would be nice to avoid something like that.
30 seconds to respond. And Mr. Nelson, we will start with you. Go ahead, please.
Okay, could you repeat the question one time, Holly? I'm sorry.
Sure. Would you be compelled to stick with the 2 finalists for Trop redevelopment selected by the current mayor, or could the process for redevelopment of the Trop start from scratch?
Yes, ma'am. We need to start fresh. It's a new administration. We need to start fresh. We don't know what bridges have been burnt with Mayor Priceman and the raise. We don't know what deals have been cut. We just need to start fresh, and we need to let the community have the say so, and we start fresh, and it's a fresh start.
Thank you for that, Mr. Nelson. Moving on to Mr. Newton.
So I think most of that didn't make much sense. Like bridges burnt. Like I don't think he had any kind of answer plan. But the idea of connecting with the community was actually a really good idea. Some kind of, I mean, I want to say that Rick Kreisman has had community input on the plans. Uh, that would definitely be something really important to maintain or to have moving forward. So
Now 30 seconds to you, sir. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Yes, thank you, Holly. It would be up to the next mayor. And as mayor, I would want to start over. I want to make sure that there's no ill will, there's no backdoor deals that have been done to make sure the people who was impacted by that. Remember, that was our Black Wall Street. All the Black businesses were down there, eminent domain, and then dropping the Trop on top of it, killed that entire Black business community. So I would want to make sure that whatever we do is going to include everybody, because the local can get those jobs and that money can stay here in this community. That's important to me, and I would definitely want to be at a fresh, clean slate when we do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Newton. Okay, on to Marcel Powers. 30 seconds for you to respond. Go ahead, please.
I'd also like to open that up to a vote for the public again, have them make the final say of what development companies we're going to go to, whether that's in a formal election or that's some informal poll done online. I also want to do a stakeholder survey with the burial grounds there and figure out how is the proper way to honor the ancestors buried on that land.
Thank you, Ms. Powers. On to Darden Rice now. I'll repeat the question. Would you be compelled to stick with those 2 finalists for Trop redevelopment selected by Mayor Kreisman?
So I think there actually is. I could be wrong, but it sounds like there's actually like cemeteries that previously existed before the Tropicana Field site was made. It sounds like the cemeteries were just left there and built on top of. That seems like a really bad idea.
Or could this process start from scratch? Ms. Rice, 30 seconds.
I think it was a mistake to start the master developer RFP process without knowing what the Rays are going to do. We're married to the Rays until the end of 2027. They do have a part in this whole process of deciding what happens next. So I led the effort to tap the brakes, to ask the mayor to talk to the Rays first before we take one step further. That is really what makes sense to me. And it's really what's fair to the developers, many of whom came up with some great ideas and great plans. But we simply need to hear from the Rays now going forward.
Thank you for that, Ms. Rice. And Mr. Welch, your turn. Go ahead.
Thank you, Holly. I'm not compelled to stick with those two finalists, but I do want to say that a lot of foundational work has been done in laying out the 21 principles and speaking to housing and equity and jobs. So I don't think that is lost work. It's not like the peer when I served on that committee and we ended up with the lens in the eye. We had to start over. I think this is different, but we do need to get the community involved, council back involved, the county and the raise, and start that discussion anew.
Thank you, Mr. Welch. And now, Mr. Blackmon, you have 30 seconds. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. We need to start back over. I don't know. Council said multiple times that they were not comfortable moving forward without the raise. And I know the council hasn't had a seat at the table, and the Tampa Bay Rays haven't had a seat at the table. So I know that the community hasn't had a seat at the table. At the end of the day, we need to make sure this development is community minded and it keeps the citizens first mentality about this. So we need to start back over because we're wasting time, emotions, and money on the project that will never come to fruition in its current state.
Thank you, Mr.
So, like I said before, just because the council isn't necessarily involved doesn't mean that the community isn't. But I do think that there were online polls or online questionnaires, but they were more than just Tropicana Field. There have been a series of like downtown redevelopment questionnaires that have been put out over the last year and a half or so, 2 years. So yeah.
Blackmon and Mr. Bolin, 30 seconds to you, sir.
I think we definitely need to have the Rays a seat at the table. I think this would be one of the things we all kind of agree about, that we shouldn't go forward and let this lame duck mayor make this.
I would say though, it probably would be a good idea to have the council people at the negotiation. You should obviously work together.
Final decision about something that's going to affect us for generations to come. I think it needs to be split up into some different parcels where we have specialization. I think outlining needs to be a big part of the discussion too about whether or not the Rays want to be there. That's where they wanted to be 14 years ago. So I'd like to kind of start over the process, but I think there has been some good work done out of that, and we can take some of those lessons we learned from this and move forward for a permanent solution.
Thank you, Mr. Bolin. And finally, to Mr. Ingram, 30 seconds to you to respond. Mr. Ingram, go ahead.
This decision should definitely be made by the incoming mayor, but that doesn't mean the consideration for the two that have been narrowed down by Kreisman should be taken away. But the new mayor should evaluate all options, not just what they've been given by the previous mayor. And as many people said, this is a decision for the people of St. Pete, but also needs to have city council and Rays at the table, because without them, we don't have a full solution.
All right.
I will say there are artist renditions of what the Tropicana Field site would look like under the two different proposals that Rick Cressman has right now. And one of them is a more green or eco-friendly, I guess, option. And it actually looks really cool. But yeah, I'm definitely open to other proposals, I suppose.
And that's going to wrap up our first segment for us now, focusing on the city and the Tampa Bay Rays.
We need to pause for a quick commercial break. You're watching the St. Petersburg Mayoral Debate 2021, brought to you by Spectrum Bay News 9 and the Tampa Bay Times. We'll be right back. Continue now with our next question. 18-year-old Tyron Lewis was killed 25 years ago this fall by a St. Petersburg police officer. Last year, protesters filled St. Petersburg streets for weeks, raising concerns about current policing in the city. Do you believe systemic racism is a problem in St. Petersburg's police department? Why or why not? Mr.
So, side note, I think the St. Pete City Council is. I don't know if they've done it yet or if they're going to do it, but they're about to declare systemic racism, I think it is, as a public emergency or a public health crisis, something like that. And I think we would be a number of cities have done that across the country, but we will be the first city to do that in Florida if the city council passes it. But I know they haven't passed it yet.
Newton, we will start with you. You'll each have 1 minute to respond.
I don't think it's a problem with it's major with the police department as it is with one of our mayoral candidates, Mr. Welch. Hatred and racism has no place in the city. And it pains me to know that that's his true heart. Our police, they do a lot of jobs. They're called on for everything. Every time that we need somebody, we dial 911. Body falls, if somebody gets shot, they make sure that they show up. Is there things that we can do? Yes, we can have conversations. I look as the next mayor doing my transition to meet with internal stakeholders and the community, and also retired police officers to make sure we address every concern that we may have. There's a lot of things that have gone on in the city. I was born and raised here, and racism and hatred has no place. I don't think it should be in St. Pete at all. And that pains me to know that that's what's going on. The police get blamed for a lot of stuff, but a lot of that is not their fault. It's not their fault. And I look forward as mayor to being sure that I'm open to everything and every option.
Mr. Welch, you were called out by name there. You have 15 seconds to respond to what Mr. Newton says, and we'll give you a minute to also answer the question as well.
Okay, so I'll just use all that time to speak to the issue because I think that's what people of St. Pete are looking for. 30 years ago, I wrote an article as a Times guest editorial writer about being profiled by police in another part of the county in Largo. And I happen to have law enforcement officers with me. We played in a Christian band. And that experience stuck with me. And that still happens to this day. And so every department has to be accountable. They have to have leadership from the top down about what will be accepted. Every part of our community needs to be treated with respect. Having said that, we need to be in touch with the community. Recently we had 18 murders in the city, and the NAACP had community conversations in 6 different neighborhoods. I attended every one of those meetings and talked to the neighbors to see what they're experiencing. And the police officers were there as well. That's what we need moving forward. We need to have those conversations. A lot of folks on this call didn't come to one of those meetings. You can't lead if you're not with the people. That's why I start in touch in the neighborhoods, working with law enforcement and with the neighborhoods to make our communities safer.
Thank you, Mr. Welch. Ms. Rice, let me repeat the question for you. Do you believe systemic racism is a problem in St. Petersburg's police department? Why or why not?
I think it's important to define systemic racism because systemic racism most certainly does exist. It doesn't mean that an individual is a racist. It means that systems like education, healthcare, banking, and housing, and the criminal justice system certainly retain vestiges of what were racist policies that still persist to this day. So the criminal justice system has a lot of systemic racism that is left over. I'm certainly not saying that anyone individually is a racist, but we have to be honest and recognize that there's certain things that we've inherited over the decades that are here because originally it benefited one group of people over another. I will tell you that as mayor, there will be absolutely no corner that a white supremacist can hide in our police department. They aren't there now, nor will they ever be, and we'll continue to work to make everyone safe in our city.
I think it's worth noting that throughout St. Pete, um, when it comes to redevelopment areas like building the interstates or building the Tropicana Field site, it was always done predominantly in uh, black neighborhoods. Like I think it's 275 or 175 was built over. I think it was called Sugar Hill. Could be wrong. Yeah, there's a number of neighborhoods that were completely wiped out to make room for these, um, you know, this new infrastructure, I guess. And I mean, actually, one interesting thing that you can see today that comes from Tropicana Field site is that in that gas plant district, there are a number of black-owned businesses, and some of them did move, but ever since then, like the number of black-owned businesses has been significantly lower, uh, comparatively speaking, I guess. Ever since then, not basically not many of those businesses either moved or survived, and that it's one of those things where like when you talk about institutional racism, like you don't necessarily see it, but it's kind of there sometimes, and it's one of those and a lot of the stuff. This is fairly recent. This is stuff that was done in the late 70s, 80s, even I suppose going into the 90s. I mean, I think it was in 1998 that we actually had even I think there was a race riot, or it was something to do with a police shooting, but I don't remember it exactly. But yeah, St. Petersburg isn't exactly free of those issues.
Thank you, Ms. Rice. Ms. Powers, to you. You have 1 minute. Same question.
Systemic racism and white fragility are prevalent just about everywhere in our society. And that's a problem. However, with the police force, I believe that dealing with their own traumas is more of an issue than anything else. And I would like to see all of our police officers go through internal family systems therapy and have to work through their own childhood traumas. And many of our police officers are vets, so they also need to work through their own issues from various traumas they've had in their life from childhood to adulthood.
Thank you. Mr. Blackmon, you're on to you. Let me repeat the question. Do you believe systemic racism is a problem in St. Petersburg's police department?
Well, peaceful protests are a part of our democratic process, and I fully support the right of anybody to share their opinion, and it always makes us better. We can only learn from hearing more viewpoints. That being said, I want to make it very clear, as some of the other candidates did not, I do not believe that racism is an issue within our St. Pete Police Department. I fully support our officers. We have one of the most diverse police departments in the entire nation, and our diversity is what makes us so strong. That being said, we can curb crime by supporting our police. I lived in Midtown St. Petersburg for a number of years across from Melrose Elementary on 13th Avenue South. And all the time people ask for more officers. And with the murder rate up and violent crime up in our city, we need more officers because everyone in every neighborhood in our city deserves to be safe and feel safe when they go home and put their head down their pillow at night.
Thank you, Mr. Blackmon. Mr. Bolin, you also have a minute for this question.
As someone who grew up in St. Pete and who lived through the 1996 Teron Lewis civil disobedience, this is something that I've been paying very close attention to, and I've been a part of my life for a very long time.
I guess it was 1996.
I think systemic racism exists in America in a lot of institutions, but I do not think it is a pervasive problem in St. Pete Police. I think we've come a long way under Chief Holloway, and we've improved a lot from those times in that era, and we've been fortunate enough to not have any incidents since then, since 1996. But I want to say, for one of the things that's part of systemic racism is the failed war on drugs. We keep locking up Black and brown people over things like marijuana. It doesn't make sense. If we're going to really move forward with this issue, we've got to end the failed war on drugs, and we've got to strive and challenge. We have a great police department here in St. Petersburg. I've been able to get acquainted and know a lot of them over the years. They're working downtown, and I just think I want to challenge them to be the best police force in America. I want St. Pete to be synonymous with best police in the United States, and I think we can do that if we challenge our already great police force.
So I think ending the war on drugs that would do a good amount of good, I guess. Although I don't know what a mayor can do. I mean, I don't think he can. I think I really don't know. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Bolin. Mr. Ingram, you have a minute for the same question.
I believe that the most important thing for our police department is accountability. Systemic racism exists on all levels of the United States, and even if we haven't had any incidents of it, we need to bulletproof ourselves against any potential future instances. So the most important thing is not whether or not there is systemic racism, but ensuring that there is no home for systemic racism on any level of our city, whether it be the police department or whether it be how we zone our different districts. Everything needs to be prepared and bulletproofed against any potential systemic racism now or in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Ingram. And finally, Mr. Nelson, 60 seconds.
Yes. Well, to answer your question, I don't have a squeaky clean background, but I think my experiences are preparing me right now today to do this job. I understand it from both spectrums, and the police department needs community support. They need someone like me to introduce them to the community, to restore and trust, and just to open the communication with the police department. A lot of times the officers come to the neighborhood, they talk to them, they're afraid of them. We need to break down that barrier and have open communication. And my program to stop gun violence, to target our youth from pre-K to high school and get to more intellectually sound, I think that would minimize our violence in the city long term.
All right, thank you, Mr. Nelson, for that, and for all of you for answering that question. We'll move on to our next question now, and each of you will have 30 seconds to respond to this question, and here it is. St. Petersburg has recently experienced an alarming number of shooting deaths. What do you attribute this violence to, and how would you address it as mayor? And again, you'll have 30 seconds, and we will start off with Ms. Powers. To you, please.
So I will say, I didn't know about this until it was on the debate about the increase in shootings, but yeah, interesting.
I attribute the violence that has occurred in our city to the pandemic and to social distancing and people not knowing how to integrate back with each other after being isolated for so long. And unlike most people,
That seems like kind of a extreme opinion. Isolate. I mean, I get that actually extreme isolation can mess with you, but I don't know if you really had that in St. Pete necessarily. I mean, you know, I don't really have anecdotal evidence or lived experience, I guess, to pull from that. Having worked at a grocery store, not much isolation there during the pandemic, at least. But I don't. It's even. Yeah, I don't see the pandemic being the cause of, or you know, the shutdown being the cause of an increase in shooting crimes. Not unless there's some data to support it.
I spent most of the pandemic going to meetings about how to communicate with other people, doing nonviolent communication, pinging in nonviolence. So there's a lot of tools in my tool belt to get people to communicate again.
Maybe I'm misinterpreting all of that, but I don't know. That's what it sounded like.
Thank you for that, Ms. Powers. And now to Ms. Rice, you have 30 seconds. Go ahead, please.
Well, of course, we have been through an unprecedented economic and health crisis. I think it's important for the city to step up and be able to offer people or show people a way to get help, to get mental help. There's certainly no shame at all in asking for help and dealing with stress. And I think it's important for the city to continue to support the organizations in our community that support mental health and talk through these issues with people.
All right, thank you, Ms. Rice, and we'll head over to Mr. Welch now. I know you touched on this a bit earlier, sir, but to talk a little bit more about it, what do you attribute this alarming number of shooting deaths to, and how would you handle it as mayor?
Well, after the 13th shooting, which resulted in a young lady dying right in front of my father's former office at 1601 16th Street South, I called a meeting, brought the community together in a private session, no media, no social media, and asked the question, what's happening? Young people were there, and they said there's a lack of hope. There's a lack of a path to success that young people see. So we need to flood the zone with opportunity for our young people and actually talk to them about what they're seeing. I've already done that, and I have a youth summit on June 1st to follow up.
So I think that's a pretty good point. Is that can be somewhat influenced by the pandemic, but I think that's more of just a thing in the modern era, I guess, is a sense of, I don't want to say hopelessness, but it kind of can seem that way sometimes, especially when you look at politics on a national level, or when you look at uh, just job opportunities sometimes, or school debt when it comes to college, universities, or not being able to actually go to the university because you can't get a loan or this or that.
Thank you, Mr. Welch. And to you now, Mr. Blackmon, you have 30 seconds. Go ahead, please.
Although, like, how that ties into increased shootings, I don't know. It'd be interesting to hear.
On council, I fought for ends to gun violence. I put forward a new business item to have a gun buyback program. I also want more educational opportunities because that's why kids turn to crime.
That's actually kind of surprising to hear from like a registered Republican. It's a gun buyback program. That's usually I haven't heard that from a Republican before. It's interesting.
Because they have no economic
Not to say that they never do it. I haven't heard of it.
opportunity and they don't see a future. So we need to show kids there's a better way forward through different educational opportunities. That being said, I went to a number of the NAACP's community conversations, but Commissioner Welch was a commissioner for 20 years, and the problem got no better under his leadership in South St. Pete. So why should we expect any different now?
And because you have addressed him by name, I will have Mr. Welch respond to that. Go ahead, sir.
I mean, if I had a graph of, I guess, gun violence from 2000 to 2020, that would either prove or falsify that statement. But
Well, I think if you talk to the people in the community who've seen me working for 20 years to create an
I guess I could do that right now, actually. Sometimes I don't know how to spell. Violent crime and firearm usage. Well, this is so you can see here 55% of murders involved a firearm, a pattern that trended upward. I don't know if that means murders specifically with a firearm or just murders in general, but you see a trending upward. Although manslaughters, that's down. That's good, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, I guess yeah, criminal homicide, you do see increases since 2015. I mean, this is a short period here, but that's interesting. That does seem that there is an increase in gun violence. Although overall, the crime rate, I mean, I guess it's probably nationally. I see the pandemic coping skills. That does seem, I don't know, perhaps that's more of a issue than I realized. Let's see what else is there. "20 murders annually in South St. Pete." Let's see. I guess that's enough. So crime does seem to be increasing after all. But yeah, I guess the next question would be is, I mean, obviously our city's population is increasing as well. So, I guess is it increasing alongside the population, or is it relatively the same? I don't know. Not that it matters. Good violence is bad either way.
APAD program that more than 4,000 people have gone through to avoid being arrested. We have the highest juvenile diversion program, most effective juvenile diversion program in the state. The Times has reported on that. And so we've been working on this issue. I don't know where Mr. Blackmon has been, but I've been in the trenches working with the people in the community. This isn't the first time that they're seeing me.
Thank you, Mr. Welch. And we'll move on now with this question to Mr. Boland. I'll repeat it. St. Petersburg has recently experienced an alarming number of shooting deaths. What do you attribute this violence to, and how would you?
I think it's worth noting also that Ken Welch, he was on the county commission, if I remember correctly. So like county commission of Pinellas County. So that's not just St. Petersburg, but I think that includes Clearwater. I want to say Dunedin as well, Largo, the whole all of Pinellas County essentially. So I mean, while he has some say in stuff going on in St. Petersburg, he had a much broader, I guess, area to work with. He could have turned, or Ken Welch could have turned it around on Robert Blackmon, having been and actually Darton Rice, having been St. Pete council people. They could have perhaps, done more to curb violence. But Ken Welch does seem like he doesn't want to launch attacks like that, even having been attacked. I think it's one of the things about being a front runner is that you're going to be attacked. But all of the attacks against him have just kind of like fallen short. Like the one from Pete Boland and the one from Robert Blackmon, and then the one that eventually came more recently from Darton Rice. They um, didn't stick well.
Address it as mayor. 30 seconds to you, Mr. Bowling.
I think some of it is a consequence of the lockdowns and obviously the economic despair, the achievement gap with South St. Pete. The literacy rate is down in South St. Pete. I think we have an issue too with financial literacy and a lot of hope, but it goes back to things like the war on drugs. Gun violence and drug trade tend to go well together. We need.
I think he is right about that in some ways. Regarding drug trade and stuff like that. But I would say also what they mentioned before about new opportunities, educational opportunities, economic opportunities. I mean, if you feel like you don't have any path forward, I mean, I suppose you're more likely to. I mean, if you're in a situation where you don't feel like you have anything to live for necessarily, you're more likely to do things that the average person, I suppose, wouldn't. So, opportunities, that seems to be the takeaway.
To kind of move on from some of this stuff and expecting politics as usual to create progress on this, it's just not going to happen. We need to address the real problems and move forward with new ideas.
Thank you, sir. On to you, Mr. Ingram. 30 seconds. Go ahead.
I believe that this is an issue this is an economic issue. To move forward and beat gun violence, what we need to do is not grow from the top up. We need to be growing from the bottom up. We can't grow as a city and leave behind the little guy, because that results in gun violence and poverty issues. Already in St. Pete, 10% of people are below the poverty line. So in order to fix our gun violence issue, we need to fix our economic issues to give people opportunities to do better than that.
Thank you.
That's a good point too, is making sure that that no one's left behind.
Mr. Ingram. Mr. Nelson, 30 seconds to you, please.
Yes, I'm sorry. My earbuds fell out. I'm sorry. But I believe the gun violence is a tribute to be honest, rap music and illicit drug sales in the city. They basically influence somebody's hand, and it's a big problem. And so we can't stop the rap music. So we got to bring economically more jobs for the youth. The youth, they want to have a sense of financial stability, and with our economy, there's really not much jobs for young people, and they want to feel like they have their own independence. And I think they have a job, the drug trades or the guns.
Thank you, sir. And finally, Mr. Newton, 30 seconds.
I think something that would help answer this question would be some kind of like open town hall in the area that is mostly affected. I feel like a lot of the people here, and even myself, like we're just kind of like giving our opinion of what might be the issue. But like I know Ken Welch, I think he said it, he had gone there to ask them, and it'd be nice to hear like some of the individual stories, and that would better shape a solution to this whole issue.
I can see you. You need to unmute, sir. There you go. We got you now. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. As I said before, chickens coming home to roost. Most of these 20-year politicians and 8-year politicians, they're delusional. I mean, summer jobs, absolute jobs.
He says 20-year politician, but he's been in politics at least 15 years. I mean, he can't really throw out the term career politician to somebody else and not take the same title. So a little hypocritical, but that's nothing new in politics.
Food stamps, welfare, government cheese, free lunch, reduced lunch. You're looking at it. I'm a living testimony of what could be. Once these kids get arrested, we had 54,772 juvenile arrests last year in this state. And St. Pete is number one for arresting juveniles. They cannot get a job. They cannot go to the military. They cannot go to school. There's nothing less but illicit activity and crime. And no, I don't go to none of those murder marches because I want to make sure I provide opportunities so the kids don't kill each other.
Thank you for that, Mr. Newton. Thank you to all for our.
I'm going to assume that by murder marches, he meant the, the BLM protests from last year. I sounded a little not thrilled about the marches, but
Second segment there. We have to leave that right there, though. But coming up on the other side of the break, we will have our lightning round as the St. Petersburg Mayoral Debate 2021, brought to you by Spectrum Bay News 9 and the Tampa Bay Times, will continue right after this.
The hour is going by fast. And before we jump into our lightning round, we have to ask about the major topic of the year, coronavirus.
Yes, we do. We're going to start this segment off this way. Each of you will have 30 seconds to respond to this question. Is there anything you would have done differently as mayor during the pandemic? 30 seconds. We'll begin with Ms. Rice. Go ahead, please.
I think it's worth noting that this question, it comes, almost a year and a half after the virus really kind of let loose, I guess. So, like, everyone here has, hindsight, and we all have a lot more information now than we did in March of 2020. So I think it's worth keeping that in mind when listening to all of these answers, because, like, realistic, like, yeah, like a lot of these people have much better ideas now, but if you threw them back in time, would they have made the same choices? Like, what are the odds?
I would have been very clear from the beginning of what we intended to do with the Grand Prix shutdown. There was also a long discussion about what to do about spring breakers. We deferred to the sheriff, who had some odd arguments about how he couldn't help out people that were standing in the water. I would have been much more clear about communicating to the public health threat of the pandemic, so that we could all get on the same side working together to help save lives, to wear masks, and to do what was necessary.
Thank you, Ms. Rice. Mr. Welch, anything you would have done differently as mayor during the pandemic?
So that's kind of a good, like, a prime, whatever the word is, like, wearing masks like that. I think for St. Pete, we didn't actually enforce a mask mandate until May. Of course, like, the time frame isn't necessarily specified here, but masks that's something that, the science hadn't necessarily been settled on it until, I guess, about May, or maybe it was April. I don't know exactly when, but hindsight, yeah, we know masks were helpful, but in the moment, it wasn't exactly settled yet.
No, in my final year as county commissioner, we dealt with the pandemic in close cooperation with all the mayors in Pinellas County. Mayor Kreisman, Mayor Hibbert, they all did a great job. We got a uniform message to the public. We followed the science. We did what we needed to do, even shutting down the beaches when we needed to, and went to the mask order, listening to the health experts, and it kept our healthcare system intact. Mayor Kreisman did a great job during the pandemic.
Thank you for that, sir. And moving on to Robert Blackmon, 30 seconds to you. Go ahead.
As a city council member, I immediately led when the pandemic hit. I consulted a series of doctors privately, and I put forward a comprehensive plan to reopen in a safe manner. I advocated for reopening small businesses before the beaches. I've always stood with our small business community. In fact, I'm right now at the Mill restaurant in downtown because I'm such a strong supporter of our small businesses. I fought against mask mandate shutdowns for fines for businesses when they were no longer necessary, and I followed the science the entire way. So I would not have crippled our small business community as the mayor did.
Thank you, Mr. Blackmon. On to Mr. Boland. Sir, I know you've spoken about this publicly, but 30 seconds now to address if you would have done anything differently during the.
If I remember correctly, small businesses were allowed to take certain loans from the federal government. I mean, I know a lot of them ran up quickly, but I don't know.
Pandemic. Go ahead.
Also, I know a lot of, I guess, businesses that were, served food or whatever, they were able to do delivery, but I suppose some of the other places, maybe not so much. Yeah, I don't know.
I'm going to need a lot more time than 30 seconds, I'll tell you that much. But one of the big things we totally missed the boat on in every corner of our country was promoting immune system health, how to bolster your own immune system. The idea of evading corona for the rest of your life was not practical. We needed to have a public health movement, and we failed our people by not telling them how they could better equip their own bodies to encounter this microbe. We did things.
So I think that point lies at fault with the president at the time, but that's just my opinion.
It's like add air purification system that's proven by science to work. We didn't participate in the mass theater. Individual responsibility need to rule the day. I'd love to talk about this some more. Bring it on.
Thank you for that, Mr. Boland. Moving right on down the line now to Mr. Ingram. 30 seconds to you. Go ahead.
I believe that Mayor Kreisman did very well at protecting all our people against coronavirus. We were consistently one of the lowest places for coronavirus, even as Florida became a hotbed for the pandemic. And just
even now, amidst the increase in Delta variant cases, Pinellas County is still doing remarkably well.
Well, we need to be ensuring that
Like I think better than even Hillsborough County, and certainly better than uh, the counties in South Florida. I think.
we're not leaving our small businesses behind. They need to be a top priority. Also, the health of people needs to be the highest priority, because if you don't have anyone here who's left well and alive, you don't have anyone left to run or go to a small business.
Thank you, Mr. Ingram. Mr. Nelson, 30 seconds to you to respond. Go ahead.
Yes, the pandemic was a very difficult situation for the whole world, to be honest, and no one was prepared. But one thing like we can do, we live in Florida. My healthy tree helping at least 1 to 2 trees on every parcel. We'll have a healthier community in whole. I'm growing up, I didn't have to come in the house until 6 o'clock. I could eat off the land. So healthier community with emergency plan will be good.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Mr. Newton, anything you would have done differently as mayor during this pandemic?
Well, can you hear me? I'll make sure I'm muted. Okay. As a state legislator, we help thousands of people get their unemployment. We help them get SNAP benefits. The only thing I saw that was wrong was when the benefits and resources arrived, it was chaos in trying to get them out. You know what I'm saying? And the county commission sat on $60 million and said they had a hard time getting it to the people. So these businesses suffered, a lot of them folded. It's hard to say you support business when the resources are there for them and you can't get it to them. It was too many impediments in the way. It was a global pandemic. But when the funds arrived, we should have been able to get them to the people.
Thank you, Mr. Newton. And finally, on this question, Ms. Powers, you have 30 seconds.
So we had
At some point, Kent Welch, I think he lost a connection, and I don't think he ever came back.
transitioned our business to a delivery model right before the pandemic. So we were prepared to deliver food to all the people, and we were really slammed. However, we ended up having a second job, which was mental health counseling. People who would be ordering produce from us and keep us on the phone for a half hour, sometimes to an hour, just talking about what they're going through, what they were afraid of. I would have loved a hotline from the city to take care of that, so we wouldn't have had to have done that.
So one thing I noticed about her throughout the entire debate was that she seemed very, I guess, monotone, not very, I guess, enthusiastic. Like Pete Bowen, he's kind of he's got that enthusiastic or enthusiasm in the way that he talks, charisma, whatever you want to call it, and she kind of sounds just very monotone, robotic. But it's one of those things where like it doesn't necessarily bother me too much, but if you're trying to um, like if this is like your one chance to really get out to the people, you want to be at 100%. And I think that's like partly why you see these kind of little low numbers for Powers and Nelson. Like it's I think a lot of it has to do with just I don't know if it's all to do with this particular debate. Like I know it's only got 3,000 views, but it was live streamed. It was played on Bay News 9. I mean, a number of people did see this, and if that's their only impression of you, it might not be the best.
Thank you all for those answers. Now it's time for our lightning round. For the rest of the questions, you will have just 15 seconds to respond each, and we'll see how many we can get through. First question, should the city privatize its marina? We're going to you first, Mr. Blackmon.
Absolutely not. It's been an asset that's been paid into by the public. We should have a management company so that we can become smarter and get more money for our citizens. But in no way should a public asset be privatized because it's our waterfront. It's all the citizens' waterfront. We should never give away to a private company for profit.
Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Bowen, to you.
No, I don't think we should.
These are also kind of like surprising takes from registered Republicans. I think it's important to note that I guess with St. Pete being more Democratic, Republicans are a lot more moderate than some of the other Republicans you might see in the state of Florida or in the party as a whole. And yeah, it's interesting.
To privatize the marina. The marina is very near and dear to me as someone who works at Corrigan's Irish Pub. That whole community is fed by places like
I think they all actually are in agreement on this particular issue.
Corrigan's Irish Pub. I think the city is very capable of managing it itself and bringing in a management company instead of a for-profit company from Tennessee that deals with fresh water, not salt water.
Thank you, Mr. Bowen. Mr. Ingram, you have 15 seconds. Same question.
I believe that St. Pete should not privatize the marina, as this company that's trying to come in is looking to increase the slip size, which is pushing out the little guy. So essentially, we need to be growing from the bottom up, just like the rest of our city. We can't be looking only at super yachts and millionaires.
Thank you, Mr. Ingram. Mr. Nelson, to you, same question. Should the city privatize its marina?
Definitely not. I believe our waters are for our community, and if there's some way we can implement a program to have more jobs for our citizens, I think that would be better than outsourcing.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Mr. Newton, to you.
Absolutely not. When I was on council, they were looking at doing privatization. I think that our marina district and the ones that run it, I was the only politician that actually went down there and visited them. They do a yeoman's job. They make a lot of revenue. In fact, it was only.
So he was on council 2006 or 2007 to 2015. So that would have been under, I guess, yeah, that was under Rick Bakeman. I don't know exactly what year he's referring to, but he had Rick Baker. Bill Foster, and he was there for a couple years for Rick Reisman. So I'm not sure under which administration he was, or which term he's speaking about. But just a little side note.
Oh, I think he topped his 15 seconds there. So let's go on to Ms. Powers. Should the city privatize its marina?
Personally, I think no. However, all these decisions need a public vote. They're too big for one person.
Thank you. And Ms. Rice, yes or no? Should the city privatize its marina?
Absolutely not. No one here has more experience than I do working on waterfront charter protections and the waterfront master plan. Absolutely nothing should be privatized.
And unfortunately, Mr. Welch, I think, dropped off the Zoom call
Yeah,
here.
we had a technical issue, so we are working to get Mr. Welch back. Hang with us there. We're sorry about that. As soon as we get him back, we'll let him weigh in on that as well. So as they work on that, though, we will move on to our next question here in the lightning round. Again, 15 seconds. Is there a project that you would invest in during your first term to protect St. Petersburg against climate change? And in 15 seconds, be as specific as possible on what you would do to protect the city against climate change. And Mr. Blackmon, you are up first. 15 seconds. Go ahead.
So leading with science would be most important to me. I've fought to revitalize the science center in my district on the west side of town, so
Leading with science.
we can teach scientific learning to our youth. Also, I'd like to plant.
Actually, I think speaking of the science center, they actually just got the funds to revitalize it. I think. I want to say they got it all approved, so that's kind of cool.
Oyster beds and mangroves because we have to have natural shorelines and resiliency, which is the best way to maintain our environment and protect against climate change.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Boland, over to you. 15 seconds.
I wish at least the majority of Republicans kind of held that, not necessarily that particular viewpoint, but at least we're willing to consider science, listen to it,
As someone who grew up in
or at least more than it seems like they do. Most that I know in my life tend not to, but of course that's just my own experience, and there's a lot more people than those people that I know.
acres and whose home was flooded in November from Tropical Storm Eta. I know this is a very important thing. We need to do the best we can to recruit the best grant writing teams to help elevate and lift our vulnerable neighborhoods up. And I'd like to carry on the tradition of Mayor David Fisher. I'd like to plant tons and tons and tons of trees all over our city.
Thank you, Mr. Boland. Mr. Ingram, as mayor, what would you do to protect the city from climate change? 15 seconds.
The best way for us to protect our city from climate change is using our natural defenses. Seagrass beds, oyster bars, this is all stuff that will not be damaged by tropical storms, as if we put a seawall up. It would require constant public investment into and would also help revitalize our ecosystem.
I think that kind of builds off of what Blackmon was saying of using whatever natural resources we have to do that. And I think that's really how we should be thinking in the 21st century. We should use whatever tools that are at our disposal that are most resourceful. And I think, I hadn't actually heard of some of these ideas until I saw this debate. So that was really interesting.
Mr. Nelson, 15 seconds to you. Go ahead, sir. I think you're muted.
I'm sorry, I have to look more into this, but maybe if we gave incentives for residents and businesses to go more greener, that could help. Also, my healthy tree, healthy me, more landscaping trees across the city.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Mr. Newton, 15 seconds to you. What would you do?
I would leverage money in the budget and use my relationships and bridges that I built in Tallahassee. For the first time, we have money in the budget for climate change mitigation. I would bring some of that money down to help those people in Snell out and show acres who suffer from the effect of climate change on an annual basis.
Thank you, sir. And Ms. Powers, what would your plan be?
Hyperloop monorail system that feeds into a carbon filtration sewers for man-made mitigation. Voice.
All right, I think we lost your signal just a little bit there, but Ms. Rice.
I like the idea of maybe not necessarily a monorail. I think monorails are a lot more expensive to maintain as opposed to a regular high-speed rail line. Like I know that they sound very similar, but I guess you use different types of tracks, and they don't they're not compatible with each other. So like with a high-speed rail line, you could use existing infrastructure, but with the monorail system, you have to start entirely from scratch. Either way, I mean, it sounds neat, but I don't know if that necessarily answers the question.
Climate change prevention, what would you do?
Under my leadership, the city identified numerous projects, and under my leadership, we found the money to help pay for building energy efficiency projects that save money and cut pollution. And we will finish that list when I'm elected mayor.
And we will have to leave it at that. We want to thank all of our candidates. We are out of time. Thank you so much for participating in our debate. We want to wish you all the best of luck.
For everyone at home, thank you for watching. We still have a ways to go to Election Day, which is on Tuesday, August 24th.
All right, so that was the debate. And so after that debate, I guess about a month after that debate, that's when you see these numbers No, that's when you see these numbers come up. That's when you see support for Ken Welch improve and Robert Blackman. I think like Robert Blackman, I don't see how Darden Rice can overcome that hurdle. Um, yeah, I think like she was an early front runner, but I think that the most recent advertisements that she put out that kind of backfired, like that's it comes at a really poor timing because a lot of the mail-in ballots they were sent out. Like I've just got mine a few days ago. So if you a number of people may have switched their mind. Of course, 20%. You know, there's a question of I guess party breakdown on there. Like how many of that 20% are independent, Democrat, Republican? I suppose it might be. Let's see. Yeah, I said okay. Well, that's Democratic Party. Oh, so this is do you plan to vote? Unsure. I think you should always vote. Uh, Now, granted, like there won't always be a um, might not always have like the best candidate. Maybe you know maybe you don't like any of these people. Maybe if you're a big fan of Trump, you probably don't like any of these people because none of these people really. I don't. None of them, even Republicans, have endorsements from him or talk like him. So you probably won't. And if same if you're I guess on the other side, if you're a Bernie fan, you know, there's no one really like that. You kind of have a lot of people that are center and center left here. So it's very like all these people really seem to have very similar ideas. And I honestly don't remember what my point was. So I will just jump into the political party breakdown. So regarding this uh poll here, the unsure have it broken down. So it looks like 17% of Democrats who were polled were unsure of who to vote for. Although they seemed to favor Welch to Rice, as you can see there. When it came to Republicans, they heavily favored Blackman. And it looks like Welch, who's a Democrat, actually came ahead of Boland, who is a Republican. So that's very interesting. Of course, like something you can see across all of these is that Powers is very low. Newton, he has more support in the Democratic Party, but um, I don't. It's not gonna. He's third, when it comes to the rankings here, so it's not really gonna do much for him, unless, of course, this unsure number goes to him, but that doesn't seem entirely likely. Independent voter breakdown. Um, so independents seem to prefer Blackman, and then it's Welch again. Welch is the either number one or number two. So if if he doesn't win an outright majority on October or August 24th, he'll definitely be in the runoffs. The next question is who is going against him, and all the signs seem to lead towards Blackman, but we shall see. Looks like age 18 to 29 are it's actually more in support of Blackman. I wouldn't have guessed that. What else we got? I mean, it's actually Newton too, and that's a pretty high number for Newton. So he definitely has the youth. Welch tends to have middle age and older, I suppose. That's interesting that Blackman's numbers go down with age. That's really interesting. Rice goes up with age. That's actually really surprising. I thought she would have a higher percentage. Wow. Newton goes down with age. That's really fascinating. Oh, Rice does. Oh, okay. When it comes to gender breakdown, looks like Blackman's number one, but Welch is a close number two. When it comes to female responses, Blackman and Rice in a tie. That's wow, a dead tie. Of course, like as I mentioned before, the unsure numbers here are they they pretty much kind of make the whole thing kind of meaningless. But if unsure was 0%, that would be really nice. So Asian or Pacific Islander. Welch, Powers, and Newton. Yeah, I guess that's pretty much all I've got for today. Um, it does seem like, uh, you know, it'll be Welch versus Blackman. The runoff election. Still don't know exactly what day it is. But yeah, let's see what other polling we got. Yeah, I mean this is just awful. 45% undecided. It is their old polls too. Like that. So that's back when. Oh, actually, Ken Welch was still leading back then as well. For a short time, I thought Darden Rice was leading the pack, but I think she may have just been leading in. Yeah, she was leading in fundraising. She has this political action committee it's the one that apparently got it was donated to by Republican donors or something. I mean, that's $500,000. So that. Let's see who else is here. There's a couple names here that um, they aren't in the running anymore. Like Michael Levinson, I don't even remember seeing him, but he's not on the ballot. Vincent Wiki, he's not on the ballot. They're not on the ballot. They didn't. I don't think they've filed in time or something like that. But so these are the endorsements here. You can see Jim Davis. He was governor for Florida, or ran for governor of Florida back in 2006. Charlie Crist, um, Charlie Justice, Janet Long, commissioners for Pinellas County, Ken Burke, clerk of the court, Deborah Clark. These are some names you might have seen here and there. Bob Galtieri, the sheriff. That's actually kind of interesting. It's like Ken Welch. He had a little. I want to say altercation, not altercation, but a little spat with another commissioner by the name of Kathleen Ford. I want to say there's a few different Kathleens in the area, but I don't. I think Kathleen Peters. Yeah, it's Kathleen Peters. Okay. Because he had Ken Welch. He had a BLM mural on his background during a Zoom call. So there's a whole, BS thing about that. That's interesting. Bob Galtieri, who's a Republican sheriff of Pinellas County, is uh, endorsing him. I think Bob Galtieri, he used to be against body cams, but he recently came around to it or something like that. He's got Bob Buckhorn, Deborah Fig Sanders, who's on the St. Pete Council, Amy Foster, Charlie Gerds, former councilman. His son, I believe, is actually running in District 1. Mayor of Clearwater, Frank Hibbert, who's a Republican. Rick Kreisman, as I mentioned before. That's what he looks like if you have never seen him before. Lisa Wheeler Bowman, another city council person. Bill Law, former president of St. Pete College. Yeah, you have a lot of endorsements for Ken Welch. Then compared to like the others, like Darden Rice. Actually, it's not on here, but another former St. Pete mayor. Bill Foster. He endorsed Ken Welch as well. But yeah, for Darden Rice, you only have Gina Driscoll, a couple organizations, Robert Blackmon, a couple people like Kathleen Peters. I think she was on the city council at one point. Former state representative, that's what it was. Bob Ulrich, I think he was mayor in the 80s of St. Pete. Maybe it was the 90s. It was a long time ago. But Ken Welch, he's got a very partisan list of endorsements, and I think he'd be a good mayor. I don't think having Republican endorsements is necessarily a bad thing. I mean, some people might say it is. I mean, I don't think Ken Welch. Like, I never like. I know like some of Darden Rice's attacks on him try to make him out to be a Republican or a conservative or to try to tie him to Donald Trump, but I don't. I've been following Ken Welch ever since his announcement for mayor, and I've never gotten that impression from him. He seems just like a middle of the road kind of guy. His fun fact: his father ran for mayor at David. He was on the city council, ran for mayor. I want to say in 1991. Didn't work out, but here we are 30 years later. Kind of a funny little thing. What else we got? I guess that's about it. Yeah, I think there's a chance Ken Mulch can reach that 50% point. He's the only person that I think would reach that point. But if he doesn't, he'll surpass it on the second ballot. Unless some crazy outlandish scandal pops out on Ken Welch, he's got this in the bag. And I guess that's it for now. That's all I've got. If you have any questions, now's the time to throw them out. I'm going to post this on YouTube pretty soon. Feel free to drop some questions there as well if you need to. And yeah, that is my takeaway of the 2021 St. Pete mayoral debate / mayoral race, whatever you want to call it. And yeah.